Yeah, the video is getting slower. What happened? Okay. So now I listen to you. Yeah, now I hear you. Yeah, it got slower at certain. It was lagging. It did lag for a short time. What's good? Do you hear me? Yeah, fine. Okay, that's good. How's it going? Yeah, me too. Me too. Thank you, guys. Tell me, Fabio. Okay, thank you, guys. Before I go to start to introduce my work, also thank you, guys. I really want to do this live, and I've been telling this Fabio for a long time that it was one of my dreams also to go to Vienna and do it live in front of people. So you owe me another one. So it's this one is not enough for me, especially after all these tests. Yeah, yeah. But yeah, I really appreciate your opportunity for me to speak with you guys. So can I start now? Okay. Okay. So can I? Does they hear me? Okay. So okay. Yeah, yeah, I will just give you the signature like this one. Okay. Okay, I will start now. So can I start from here? Okay. Okay. So what's up, guys? My name is Hazem. I am Egyptian. So I am based in Italy, and I have been living here from 5 or 6 years now. So it's been a long journey since I finished architecture in Egypt, and here I am working on music industry of hip hop, doing also like merch for streetwear designs. And I don't want to speak too much today about technicality behind what you are watching, because I'm sure that there is a lot of people that they do more better than me. But what I wanted to show today is like, as Fabio told me, that how from someone who studied architecture, he started to work on these different disciplines and different fields. So I'm going to stop the video and show you my journey that started from Egypt between 2012 till 2015. So between 2012 and 2015, if you are in Egypt, it's a very difficult time to be there because we had revolution, and also in my life I had traumas like death of close people. So I will go with the revolution. So in 2012, 2011, actually, the revolution started, and for us it was like a big dream, because in Egypt it's not about living well; it's about surviving. For a long time in Egypt, it was so difficult for our generation to have even a dream for your own self. You don't have ambition. You just need to live to survive. there is no more than this. You don't have any possibility to be something extra than just a normal worker. So when the revolution came, it was like it was a dream for our generation. And we all participated in that. So I will go fast because if I go emotionally on my life, it will take too long because my story is too long. So the revolution started as a good thing, and also in the middle of it, it had a lot of violence. It had a lot of events that was not so easy for my generation to take. So we got used to go to the streets and see smokes, see shooting, see a lot of people getting killed, and this was like normal for us. Like it started to become normal for us. Like my generation is like a generation that he saw a lot of people die. So even though it was something that we wanted to have a better life, to explore Egypt in the future, to even not to go away from Egypt and stay in Egypt. This area, this time, it was very difficult for us, but it became the normal. So one of the most important events that happened in my life in 2012, that my cousin got assassinated. He was like got shot 2 times, and he was killed by the system. Back then, it was the Muslim Brotherhood, so they were a very brutal, barbarian system. So when he died, I felt like a big trauma in my life because he was almost my age, and I was like watching him like a passionate young guy that he stopped going to university. He started to take the streets like as a dream. Like we were dreaming in university to do something, and he was like dreaming in the streets because he was like going to the streets trying to fight for us. Even a lot of our generation, like a lot of people, they were like fighting together, like they should go to the streets or not. So he used to go to the streets, and at certain moment he got assassinated, and then I was like someone who saw that. So it was a very traumatic event in my life that changed me a lot. So one of the things that helped me to go on, that I had an architect in Egypt. He was a mentor for me, and he was like activist in the politics, and also he was a very famous of being experimental architect. That he had a lot of series that he was like helping the field in Egypt. So he was like, I went to him after this accident. He told me like, how can you reflect the death of your cousin in architecture? So from this time, I started to really take a different approach for architecture. So I was like started to search for what does it mean, war, revolution, all these kind of hard, difficult moments in architecture. So I found Libis Woods. And Libis Woods for me was like something like totally wow. Like he was like totally out of what is architects were doing. And he was still alive because I remember that he died maybe like in 2013 or 14. So he was still alive, and in this moment, I was searching for architecture and war, and I found someone that he was doing something totally different, and even some people, they were not recognizing him as an architect, and they were speaking that he's an artist. So you can see that in the way that he was working, it was some manual work. So some techniques of photos, and start to use like normal pens, colored pens, very different mixed media of layers of photos and pins, like wires, and the way that he was fragmenting his drawing was like totally. I didn't know what does it mean experimental architecture. Once I saw this guy, I was like, what is he doing? He was like totally opening for me a different approach for architecture. Like I was like doing well in university, like doing designs of house and like any architect that he was doing the traditional architecture. But I was like, no, I don't want to do this anymore. I want to start to take from this and use it. So I found myself like doing architecture in SketchUp. I don't know if anybody knows SketchUp. SketchUp is like one of the most famous programs if you are softwares that you are using for architecture. It's a 3D one that is so simple. So I used to use SketchUp for my university in Egypt, and at certain point I was like, okay, I will start to do some more complicated architecture that represents what is going on. And because also I was going through difficult times, so the architecture that I was trying to do was like also like complicated like this time. So I was like doing very simple work. It's like normal SketchUp, nothing fancy, just SketchUp, and you put some Photoshop. And I was just started to do some sketches, like digital sketches. So this was like my beginnings. It was very raw. It was very violent. It has no maturity. I was like young boy, angry. So I was trying to put all my anger in the architecture. So this is how I did reflect the death of my cousin. So it's all immature sketches, but somehow people recognize it now as kind of the basics of my work. So I started to continue in this way while I was in Egypt, and it was very difficult to stay even in Egypt while all the political problems that was happening around us. And it was getting dark with time. So I was like getting too tired of staying in Egypt. So even the architecture that I was doing, I was feeling that I need to do something else. I need to do something more, and I need to get out of Egypt. So I decided to see the most easy way to go outside was like I was not from rich family, so for me it was like getting something like scholarship, which is like something make it easy for me to go to study outside. So I decided to go to. I had that intention to go to Politecnico di Milano in Italy because I wanted to change totally the atmosphere. In Egypt, it started to become really gloomy. It started to become like really dark. So you are watching all the time TV with a lot of killings, and even me, I was watching art that was like dark back then. So one of these projects that I done before I leave Egypt was Olivier de Zagazan. Olivier de Zagazan is a French painter, body painter. So this was my first a little mature work that I have done in Egypt. Even though I didn't know what I was doing, but I want to do imitation of his artwork and reflect it on architecture. So it's like from painting to architecture. And this was like some kind of experimentation that I have done that I didn't know what I was doing. I was just experimenting. So I done it, and it was it was the crown jewel of my portfolio to put it in the portfolio for applying for the university. So that's it. I left Egypt. I was like super happy that I'm going to leave. So by the end of 2015 and the beginning of 2016, and then going to 2018, I started my second part of my transition, which is like Exodus, because going out of Egypt was like Moses when he was going out of Egypt. It was like so difficult. So I had the Exodus, and also I had second death of someone close to me. And I started to understand that I'm an experimental architect, and I started to understand that I'm a digital artist. So when I came to Politecnico di Milano and living here in Italy, life started to change because it became more different landscape. Let's say in Egypt, in Egypt it's mostly concrete, or how to say, red bricks. It's this different style of architecture, and also we don't have a lot of green areas. We don't have a lot of beautiful forest and all these things. We have desert, so it's a very different landscape. So when I came here to Italy, my mental changed totally. So I started to be more relaxed, even to do more research on experimental architecture of war. So I found Brian Cantley. He's one of my references, and he became now, and he was my teacher at System, not teacher really, but he was like someone I look up for. and now he's my friend. So Brian Cantley is one of the experimental architects that he used to experiment more on machinery and graphics of what was he doing, and at the same time it was still done in between what is manual and what is digital. So he was like trying to search between these two areas. And I did try to contact him once I came here to Italy, and I still had nothing to show you. I had to show him. I was like, I talked to him once. I was like, man, I love your work. You are like Libius was to me now, because Libius was died. So you are the only one that was left that's doing this work. So I have the passion to do it, but I had no work. So he told me, yeah, if you keep working, you will be fine. So I started to look a lot on his techniques of graphics, the way he was working, also the physical models that he was doing, and the way that he was putting a lot of graphics on physical models of machinery was interesting for me. So he's like using very interesting. He doesn't leave a space without putting some graphics, even on such complicated compositions. So I was like, the guy is like taking the work to a next level. I mean, after Libius Woods was like doing most of the work by drawings. At certain time before he dies, he started to collaborate to do models. But Brian Cantley, he was like really he was like really good in this kind of models. So he became like one of my main references. So what happened is that my father died after a couple of months I came here. So this was like a life change moment also, because I came here with the support of my father. So when he died, and just like in very short time, life changed for me also, because I started to feel that I'm alone. I have no, we say in Egypt that if your father die, you have no backbone. So it was a very trauma for me, because I didn't have the best relationship with my father, but I did appreciate him more after he left, because you can understand that he was doing the best for me while I was a young, stupid guy that doesn't understand much the effort that he was doing. So when he died, I wanted to reflect his death on architecture. So I started to do more mature architecture that actually is taking some elements from Libius and also some elements from Brian. And also the graphics started to appear. So even I started to introduce my first time to do a logo for architecture was this logo. So I started to change even the architecture that I used to do for post-war. I had a lot of projects I was doing that was not mature, but once I started to work more on these projects, I started to take elements of graphics from Brian. Same time, maybe because I'm living here in Italy and life started to change. Life in here is more easier than Egypt. So even colors started to get introduced in my work. So I started to become more colorful, even in harsh subject. So this is like post-war in Syria, Iraq, for post-Daesh, post-ISIS kind of architecture. So I was doing all these parasites, and even if it is a harsh subject and harsh topic, I was like using colorful graphics. So maybe this was like because of me living here and started to feel more life. So I started to introduce these colorful graphics for harsh topics. And I started to understand that maybe I'm trying to leave these harsh moments behind me. So I was like, okay, I would like to do this work and finish it to be satisfied that I have done work for my countries, because it's all about our countries. I want to represent something that authentic. So I want to do post-war because it is what I have been living. So I have been doing the subject, same subject is post-war, but I started to become more stylish in the way that I do the colors and representations. So this was like really time of change here in Italy. I started to become more relaxed. Even I was like bringing these graphics to the traditional work of our university. So let's say this is like mapping for landscape. So I started to bring again the elements of graphics that I have been using, and I started to understand that I have a language. So still colorful. Same time, even that at certain point that my brother, he was like, before I come here, he was like telling me, hey, Hazem, if you go to Italy, you have to take like good photos. So I was like, okay. When I came to Italy, I started to take photos and I started to post production for it. And I didn't realize that I was doing art direction back then. I was just having fun with it. So I started to do a lot of graphics for retouching my photos. So in this time, I started to explore more like digital graphics. So I was like, okay, beside architecture, I was like having fun with stuff like this, like taking portrait of mine and me in France and having fun with the colors. So I'm feeling that I'm changing. So even here in Italy, before I come here to Italy, like I was not a big fan of Renaissance paintings at all. It was like when I was young, I was like, this is totally bullshit. So when I came here to Italy, I got introduced to some painters and some artists here in Italy that like Agostino Arrivabene or Nicola Samori. So they used to do like repainting, like Nicola Samori especially. He used to do like repainting of old Renaissance paintings, and he destroyed physically. So I was like, okay, I'm going to try to do this also like by digital techniques. So I started to do this by textures. So I started to take some old photos of paintings, start to repaint it, and start to destroy it physically, not physically, digitally, by textures on Photoshop. So this is all work of Photoshop. But same time, the thing that I was like always trying to stay similar to how manual look, because I was like always looking at Lebbeus Woods and Brian Cantley. So all this period before going super CGI, all the time I have been always working with Photoshop, because I was like, I would like to just to reach this realism of manual work. So I started to do more artistic digital work by Photoshop, some models. And this period, I started to understand that maybe I'm getting also interested in the human scale. So let's say by the painting, I was approaching the portrait of the body. So here also I started to get more interested also in the models that we see in fashion. So I started to take photos of them, and I started to repaint them, like do digital painting of them, and start to do some elements. And these colors was like coming from, I don't know if you know, like Sub Rocky is a whole East Coast music that appeared in the 2015, 16, 17. So they like Sub Rock is a sub mob. So the whole French direction videos of them, it had a lot of neon colors. So I was like getting affected also by this a lot in this period. So me living here in Italy also, I started to look more on the visuals of music videos, and I started to feel like, okay, I would like to reflect this on my art. I didn't know what I was doing back then. I was just going naturally with the process. So by 2017, I was like realizing that I have like two things in my hand, like architecture elements, architecture projects, a lot of body work that I have done in architecture. And also I started to do project of art. And I had always a philosophy of being consistent. So each project, it has like a lot of drawings, it's body work. So I was like, okay, I have these two things in my hand, but they are not touching each other. So I don't know what is going on between them. So in 2017 or 18, I was like watching some video of Metallica while I was working with my friends in the university. So this video is like Dream No More by Metallica. And I remember well that the video was like, I mean, it was the comeback of Metallica. So I never been a big fan of Metallica. So when they came back, and it was a strong coming back from them, I watched the video, and I was like super interested in this video, especially because it was like giving a silhouette of a human inside the video, and you are always watching different things. It's not the typical double exposure. It's a very harsh silhouette, and you see what is going on inside. So I was like, in this period, I started even to like have the courage to take my experimentations and I started to put it on the work of the university. So I went to my students and we were working on a project. So, and I was like taking the art direction responsibility of this project. So this is like work for the university. So I was like using the graphics. I was like, okay, I would start to use this technique of Metallica video to start to represent some architecture scenes that we usually do it in the architecture university. So this was my first time to introduce like some pattern of the human. Like I was like, okay, it's not just the architecture. I just want also to have some language of the human figure inside the scene. So I didn't understand back then that I was doing this, that I'm touching something like model. No, I just like, I'm getting bored of the silhouette in the architecture drawing, and I wanted to do something that it's pushing the image more forward. So I started to do this, and at the end of my studies in the university, I had to do my thesis. And for my thesis, I was like, okay, I'm going to take my experience of what I have been doing all these years and just do what I like to do and have fun with it. So I did a project that's called Rethinking Architecture, Redrawing Architecture. So it was about unfinished architecture in Italy and Spain and most of Mediterranean countries, even in Egypt. So I took collaboration with a French photographer and like 2 French photographers to take their photos and start to do architecture on it by Photoshop, by collage. So there is no models. I just started to go directly by manipulating the image by Photoshop. And this was like kind of a movement that had been happening here in Italy for some time. But I did it in a way that still has the elements of Brian Canty and Davis Woods or the American style, because they are American. So I was like doing this work and I started to publish all this work on Facebook like crazy maniac guy. So I took all the attention of the architects here in Italy. So I was like published in each step, in each working process that I was doing for this project. I was just publishing. It was my thesis, but same time it became like a gallery at the end of the day. So I was like publishing. I got a lot of attention. Most of the architects started to ask me about what I'm doing. So I took a lot of unfinished architecture and start to rebuild new imagination buildings on it. It's still, you can understand, even if it is traditional, brutal, a little more simple than the complicated machinery style that I have been working before, but still it has elements of my design. So in my thesis, like was one of most mature times I used to work in architecture. So I was like just having fun. I was like introducing the human figure as like, it was like totally part of the drawing now. Like I'm not working anymore with a silhouette that is like black or white. No, I'm introducing elements of the human figure as a colorful pattern. It's the smallest details now I take care of it. So by the end of the university, I feel confident of what I'm doing in architecture work. And also I understand that I do some other work of graphics, but I was like getting really satisfied of, I was like happy, I was satisfied with what I have done in the university. I was like getting too much recognition for someone who's still young and still in the university. Like a lot of architects, they have been approaching me that I am someone who's old and have experience and big body of work. So I was satisfied with this. So after I finished the thesis, after I finished graduation from my university, from 2018 till now, but I will put it also to 2021, the whole process is like lost and found. It's always like this. So once you graduate, and I think a lot of people, they face this when they graduate, they don't know what will happen for them. So I had all the architecture that it shouldn't take me to work in architecture office. So I had different architectures. So I was like already realizing that I'm not going to work in architecture office. Like I had this kind of like feeling that I'm not going to fit in architecture office, especially not first time that I'm going to face graduation. Also in Egypt, when I did face graduation, I had to work in office for some small period, which is like actually 6 days. And I got fired in 6 days. So I was like, that's also one of the reasons that made me like want to leave Egypt. So I was like, yeah, I'm thinking that maybe I'm not going to fit inside architecture office. But same time, I was like, I don't know what else I should search for, because in architecture office, in architecture university, they don't teach you what you can do with architecture outside of architecture. It's only about being architect and that's it. So even if you want to go to do some, let's say if you are good in doing renders, if you are good in doing some technical work, you can work in certain special things, but nobody was like going to tell me, hey, you can work in art direction or creative direction or no. And I didn't also know what can I do with my work. So I started to keep, like I started to feel that, okay, I have now my language. Even you can see, I was like touching my portraits all the time, putting all my language on it to represent myself also with my image. So after I finished graduation from Politecnico di Milano, I had something in my hand, but I still don't know where I have to go. So I did search for all. I was like, just to satisfy close people, I was like, I'm going to search in architecture offices. I got some interviews in some places and I got no good vibes, because you can understand that the architecture offices, they just want to work, take no money, and work like a slave. You don't take any name, you don't take any recognition. It's just like a slavery work. And I'm sorry, but this is the whole situation of architecture now. It's a very bad, ugly market at the moment, and it's mostly slavery. So I was like not finding myself, and same time I don't know where to go. So at certain day, and I was like still enjoying experimenting with my drawings. I was like having fun also still with doing some Italian canaletto or pilotto, taking the paintings and redrawing on it again with Photoshop to make new versions with it. So at this period, I was like, I was with some close friend to me, and we were searching on LinkedIn, and like normal any guy, he was searching for jobs. So we found a job application for a visual designer for Gucci, and this was like a Gucci, like why you should go work in Gucci for an architect. So we found a job application for Gucci, which is like a visual designer with an architecture background. So the way Gucci wants you to apply is really different from architecture. So they wanted to have a portfolio you send for them, and they ask you to do like a small project for them. So in this way, you can go to the next stage, and maybe you can have an interview. So I did apply my portfolio, which I think is like most of this artistic work of my architecture and paintings and all this older work. So I got okay, and then I had to do the project. So I was doing this project, and I was like totally like, I'm not sure what will happen with it. So we are just trying our luck. I don't know what to say. Like it's something that you put out there, and you don't know if it will. And most of the time, you think that okay, it's just a dream. So I did put my work for Gucci, and it was in August, and I got a phone call in November asking me to go to present my project for them, because they have been really interested in my project. So I was like super shocked. This was like totally a very strange, unrealistic moment in my life, and it's like totally unexpected. So I was in Roma. I took my train, came back to Milano to check for them. So I went to the interview, and it was like a kind of CIA. I mean, it was VIP in the beginning because I got treated like a VIP in the beginning of in the door of the Gucci hub. I had been treated so well. I had taken some card to go inside. But once I got inside, they have been asking me a lot of questions about what I'm doing and why should I apply for such work. And it was crazy because I actually started to hear them speak that I am not an architect. So they told me that they had already someone who took the job, but they just wanted to meet me because my project was like so good for them to just not to meet me. So it was a great opportunity for me to speak with them. I did this visual merchandise project for them. They have been asking for a visual merchandise project. So similar language to my architecture. I have done the mood board before. So this is like a mood board. You put a lot of work of you, my atmosphere, what I feel about the model. So this is a character in the middle. So I understand, I started to understand that I'm getting close to the human scale. So I'm getting out of the whole building scale. So by visual merchandising here, I started to understand some things about brands. I have been not in touch with all of this when I was still in university. I was just looking at it like something far from me. So even I spontaneously did a new logo for Gucci. So actually I did put the male and female signs on this project so it can separate from the male and female. So I didn't take the job. I came back home and it was very huge turning point of how I think about my career, because I started to close really any more searching for architecture. I was like, sure, because they have been telling me, hey, if you work in architecture, it's not for you. You have to search in art direction or graphics, creative direction. This is what you should work for. So I came back home. I didn't understand even where I have to search, but I started to get the idea that, yes, I'm going to close on architecture. It was a difficult moment for me because also like I'm just living on my savings. But same time, I was like, I understood that I have something valuable, because if Gucci tell you to come to check your project, it means that you have something really good. So I was like getting more confidence once I did this project. I don't know what I'm going to do, but I'm going to continue. So yes. 15 minutes? Okay. Okay. So, okay, I will go to, this is where the real work happened. So I came back to my place. I started to go work on other graphics of hip hop that I like. So I started to work on album that I used to be like big fan of, like Pusha T, because the whole covering of it was like really interesting for me. So I started to work on it to do some kind of experimentation of redesign it. So I done it, and I got linked with Joe Perez, which he was like, who was the art director, and Virgil Abloh. And I was like putting my work on Instagram. So I did put my work on Instagram, and Joe Perez, he got in touch with me and he told me that this work is really good. So Joe Perez is the one that he was working for Kanye West and Pusha T. So Joe Perez is a creative director. And from here, I started to understand that I'm getting near to maybe graphic design and hip hop scene. So I like hip hop. So I was like really interested to see where I'm going. So I took this another turning point for me. So I did really good change of architecture graphics to put it on hip hop graphics, which I think also it is still understandable for people that do work on fashion, because it's an urban language of graphics. So I started to work. I started to get to know what does it mean mockups. So I started to learn also about Photoshop mockups. So you can put your artworks inside like cassette, CDs, and all these things. So this is what I have done for Pusha T, and it did give me a lot of good feedback. So I understood also that I'm getting near in hip hop. So after that, I started to have a new logo for me, which is like the barcode, to understand that I'm getting near working in brands and packages. So I was like always on the Instagram now. So I was like, okay, now I'm trying to connect with people on Instagram. So I was always on the Instagram. So I got also into on Instagram, you find people that you didn't find on the architecture school. So I found Chris Ashworth. Chris Ashworth is like one of the most interesting Swiss great graphic designers. So he had a very nice technique of interesting technique of graphics that is like mostly about packaging. And he used to do work on magazine. So you take some analog work of packages and he start to do it manually and then take photos of it. Maybe it's like really interesting because it has a little architecture style to it. It's not architecture, it's just graphics and packages. So, and I also got introduced to the work that he have done for the magazine of Raygun, and I started to know the owner of Raygun magazine, which is like Marvin Jarrett. So I got in this period to start to get interested in packages. So I don't want to see my work anymore just like a flat photo. So I was like, no, I want to put it as a mock-up, as a realistic package. So I took some freelance work I have done for that I was just finding any work that I can do. I was like, okay, taking some freelance for book, cover, whatever. Even if the concept doesn't get applied, I was just exploring my style. So to explore it on graphics. So I started to take the same graphics that I used to do and I started to do it for concepts, for album covers. And I got some commissions and some not. And I started to play with the mockups. So I started to play with graphics of this. And I started to enjoy this. I started to enjoy to see my work in realistic way. So at a certain point, I got in touch with people that they work in marine brands. So at this point, I did some project for them. So it was my first time to work on animation, because before I was only working on Photoshop. So I started to do some kind of After Effects, which is like very minimalistic, not so much work. And I did send for them, and they did really like. So they asked me to go to France to do kind of interview. So I went there and I didn't have the chance because it was like getting to summer. So the people that I was supposed to meet, we didn't meet. But same time at this period, I was like getting really in learning other stuff like marvelous designer. So I wanted to do like push my boundaries of fashion. It's a representation. So I started to learn marvelous designer. So I started to do some graphics, and this was my first fashion design on marvelous design, and I still use it till now. It's maybe my first, and I didn't do much after this. It was my first, and I still use it till now. So I started to do it. I started to do more graphics, packages altogether. So I started to do more animations, to learn more animations. So I again came back to Pusha T to do some representation of his older videos, because it has some graphics that I understood that I could play with. So I took the album, did some graphics on it. So it was
in every picture, Osama.
Another experience that I wanted to learn more of animation. So I want to keep going, and then on Instagram, first client found me was Kari. Kari is a young hip hop artist, and he is linked to Joe Perez. But because Joe Perez is expensive and he's more established, so he cannot afford his budget. So I was a younger guy and he found me. So he was interested in my style. So he asked me to do work for him. So this was my first hip hop rap client that I had to work with. And this was in 2019. So I worked with Kari, and Kari is linked to a lot of young, interesting hip hop artists. So I worked with Kari, and Kari had like really
Yo,
good
Mario Dungeon.
more than I
Honey, they
have done
running.
first time by After
She can't
Effects.
stomach.
So this was like,
Think you might
okay,
vomit. Shout out my
getting more
bad
serious
bitches. Keep it platonic.
in animation. So I was like, okay, now I'm getting to know to do more of this. So I started again to work on Chris Ashworth, to start to take his work, steal it from Instagram. And at this point, I was like becoming like someone who's like taking work from others and start to put my work on it and experiment with this. So I took again a lot of work from Chris. So I took this envelope, this package from him, and I started to put architecture work, put other new graphics of mine, introduce some new language to it to become my version. So this was like really crazy experimentation. So after this, finally, after a lot of years, I got introduced to Cinema 4D and octane render, because before this, I wanted always to have a very fast process to work. And I have been hating any program like 3D Max and V-Ray, all this render engine that takes time to render. So I got introduced to Cinema 4D and octane render, and I knew back then that they are kind of like fast process because they are depending on your GPU. So I was like, okay, I'm going to explore finally rendering on 3D, because back then before this point, I have been never using rendering. I was just always modeling on SketchUp or maybe the Marvels and put on Photoshop, and that's it. So this was my first render on Cinema 4D. And I took again the model of the Marvelous and I started to put some same patterns that I use, and I started to render it. So I took again Chris Ashworth, some graphics, and I started to use it as an architecture scene, like a background of human figure. So I did this, and I did it in animation. And I think this was my first time to render animation in this quality, and it was not actually high quality, but the way I did all this layered of human, and then the plastic, and then the background and the animation, it was first time to experiment something that it's more complicated like this. And I was like, understand that I'm getting into something that's totally different direction of mine. So this was a very interesting experimentation that I have done. It was not okay, so give me time. So I keep going with Chris Ashworth, and I have been interested in some old cartoons, so I wanted to experiment more. So I have done all this work of SketchUp and trying to bring all the elements of architecture and Cinema 4D and octane render together. So I done this project with like first time to bring all together animation, architecture, and graphics and package all together, which is like Coco the Clown. And this was the result. And also I did use the music of Griselda,
Hey, yo.
a hip hop group that I have been a big fan of. So after that, I keep doing more digital fashion. So I keep going with this direction, and I started to animate more. And I started to keep doing platforms of architecture and use it for clients for music, and started to do animation for it. So it became like a job. I didn't realize that I was doing that job. So this is like a DJ label, and I did this for them, combining again architecture, graphics, digital fashion all together. So at this point, I became close to this group, which is like my favorite group of hip hop, which is Griselda. So we were back then like under Shade Records, under Eminem. So I wanted to work with them, and I have been always a big fan. So I did some artworks that is like actually using again some old artwork of mine. I started to do some album covers for them because they are very hardcore, underground. So I started to bring the language that it can fit them. So I have done this. And I really wanted to work with them. So I have done these concepts, and then someone that he works with them, he's called Lucky Seven. He found me, and he's also a producer and a hip hop artist. So he found me, and he told me that if I do this album cover for him, it will be easy for me to get a link with Conway the Machine, which is like my first biggest client. So I did this album cover with Lucky, and yes, after 2 weeks, I got linked with Conway the Machine. So it was a very turning point in my life, because I had only 3 days or 4 days to take my chance. So Lucky, he did give me his photo, and he told me that we need an album cover in a very short time. So I took his photo, and I started to use all my experience of graphics that I had been learning all this period and make the album cover. And actually he did like it, and he used it. So from this day, I started to work with Griselda. We got published on Times Square, and this was like one of the most beautiful times in my life to see my work in Times Square, which is like the maximum. It was my favorite group of hip hop. So this was like crazy. And I started to put my graphics and my art on merch, and I found myself like interested in merch. So I started to do more of my graphics on t-shirts, on masks. It's all about merging for the artist, but same time to take my experimentation as I like. So I keep doing this. Even till today, I still do it. So this is one of my last shoes I have done, and I hope that I get a collaboration with bands with this one. And keep doing merch, keep doing artwork for Griselda, and it got represented in Venice Biennale. So this was like also like one of my dreams, to have my work in Venice Biennale. So this year I have been created to put all my work in Venice Biennale. And here I am, someone who have a dream in Egypt, and finally he did put all his work on Venice Biennale. That's it. Are you with me? Because you told me 5 minutes, so I had to run the last. Okay. Man, this is what I get if you put me the first guy. Man, I appreciate you, because I usually don't speak about my story, and I always, as you say, you didn't know about my story. I usually keep it private, because let's say it had a lot of people. They don't know that I have seen a lot of trauma in my life, and I keep it for myself. So they actually just see the results, and they don't know what is coming behind all of that. And actually, I did try my best to cut short speaking about this, because if I speak about it, I would become emotional. And also there is more complication behind all of this story. You cannot just say someone died and it's just a simple thing. It has a lot of dimension behind it. So you can understand that I'm a very emotional guy, and instead of going outside in the street to kill someone, I took all this energy, and I think I was very passionate to put it on my work, because otherwise I was going to go violent. So even that's why maybe I'm trying to match the energy with the artists that I'm working with. So let's say if you also watch with working with Griselda, Griselda is a very hardcore street style crime. So I was like finding myself with them, and it was someone coming from architecture and just doing this work with them. It was given a lot of question marks, like what are you doing? Even if I work now with maybe some people that they are more, let's say, mainstream. So just to go to the streets and work again with the guys from the streets, I just do it because I feel that these guys represent me. I feel that I am in the same wave. So a lot of people, even in the music industry, when they know, because I'm publishing myself as the architect, but they don't know that I am really an architect. So yeah, exactly, because at the end of the day, I wanted people from architecture that they have been following for a long time, that already they know that I'm an architect. But also I wanted the people that they see the cover of Conway the Machine and they read behind that art direction is by Hazem the architect, Talaat. Maybe they don't know that I'm the architect, but I'm still putting the architect out there. Because at the end of the day, I'm an architect. And I still want to transfer my work that I have done lately to architecture in the future. So I wish that I had some comments to understand who, like, is there anybody who's watching at least? Okay. Man, no, it's a pleasure for me. I will speak for you for sure privately after you finish. And thank you for this. You still owe me one. I have to go to Vienna. So yeah, yeah, yeah. Yeah. So okay, okay. I'm here in Italy. You are also Italian, so I will be chasing you, street style. So it's really a pleasure for me, guys. It's really something. Also, one of my dreams to appear with you guys. So I'm really happy that I have done. I appreciate you guys.
I am. Yes. Thank you. Yes. Yes. Thanks, Jason. Thank you. Cool. So, yeah, yeah. Mm, potentially, yeah. Let's see. Let's see how it goes. Yes. Okay, fantastic. Thank you. Awesome. So, hi everyone. Thank you guys actually for having me here. It's actually great to be here at D2. If we haven't met yet, my name is Jonathan Formento. I am an artist, designer, 3D artist, art director, all kinds of things. And I'm living and working here in London. I run a very small boutique called J Formento, which was founded amidst the pandemic last year in 2020. And we work mostly within the realms of CGI, VR, animation, film, and photography. So just a brief background. I come from a small German town in southern Brazil called Blumenau, where I lived most of my life, and there I studied 3D and design, and developed my skills from quite a young age. And then in 2014, I moved to the UK to work in Liverpool, up in the north, for an amazing agency called Uniform, which is now called Somewhere. I spent just under 5 years there, working on a multitude of projects ranging from architecture visualization, film photography, and some other stuff as well. And then in 2019, I moved down to London to work with the British designer Tom Dixon, where I've worked for over a year in a range of projects from architecture, interiors, and full range of CGI product campaigns, actually. And last year, as I mentioned, I decided to take the leap of faith and go on my own to found this small little thing it's kind of taking place right now. So yeah, when the lovely people at Autodesk asked you, hey, what do you want to talk about in your artist talk? I was a bit concerned and a bit intrigued at the same time, because the business hasn't been that old yet. It's only been around for a year, and perhaps I haven't got that experience running a shop yet that I could share with people. But I also didn't want to do the sort of stuff that I did, kind of presentation. So I decided to mix them both a little bit and create a little bit of a narrative to you guys of, how these things kind of took place and happened throughout the past 12 months. Sort of these things kind of happened because of each other, sort of thing, which was quite special. And yeah, just before I start, as Jason mentioned, I'm a sort of avid attendee at D2, and I've been going through, to the conference for the past, I don't know, like 6-7 years now, for like quite a long time. And I met a whole bunch of amazing people. I met some, now celebrities, and I made some really vital connections to my career. And just for that and for everything else, thank you guys. Thank you for the invite. Thank you, Autodesk, as well. Really appreciate it. So the first project that I want to talk about with you guys today, it's a very small but very amazing collaboration I did early in 2021 with Tom and Will Butterfield, the two South London brothers who created a project called 19 Chairs, which was basically a response to COVID-19 that brought together 19 designers, artists, and architects from across the planet to take to have their own take into these chairs that they were creating. And the final chairs would then be sold in an auction, and the funds would be destined to charity for two charities in the UK. Again, a collaboration, and it wasn't basically a commercial project, but you will see what I mean, I think, down the line, hopefully. So the whole idea of the project consisted of Tom and Will building these chairs within 19 days. So basically one chair a day. And all chairs were built with 27 by 27 millimeters square section timber and 40 millimeters wood screws, and left purposely bare so the artist would have a blank canvas to have a take on it. And then it was really nice to actually see how these chairs came to life. So, how each artist and each designer would actually, have their own take on it. So they have people like, again, Tom Dixon, they have S. Devlin, Harry Grandin, James Shaw, and a whole bunch of other amazing people having their take at the piece. These pieces were sent to many different countries across the planet, and then obviously they would come back for the final exhibition and auction. So my collaboration with them it started when I got a message from Tom and Will on the very first 2 days of 2021. And, we just talked about how we could bring these pieces into the digital world in a very fun and dynamic way, just to refresh people's mind, because the project was going through 2020, and then the exhibition was going to take place in 2021. So we just started talking about that. So the nature of the project was quite beautiful as well, because as the artists had their own take onto the pieces, I managed to have my own take onto the pieces as well, but into the digital world. So with a lot of excitement to be involved in, such a great project with a wonderful cause, an open brief, but very little time to do it. We got the models from Tom and Will, which they used to create the chairs prior, and came up with a few shots that would sort of portray, the chairs sort of coming together. So what you guys see on the screen right now are basically style frames from the explorations that we had using the chairs. So we tried to use some of the brand elements that 19 chairs had. So you have this very fresh green sort of colors. Up. So here's some other style frames that we did. We then decided to go and internet. Okay, so okay. So yeah, we decided to sort of remove the sort of gray sort of tones and keep the fresh green coloration throughout the piece. So these are some of the final style frames that we decided to take forward. Some very close-ups for people. A lot of people have asked me about the textures they use. So these are all from Texture Supply, which became really, really handy throughout the project because they have really amazing quality. Just if people have curiosity, by the way, and some other style frames basically. And then we, with that whole take, we decided that we wanted to make 3 treatments for social media that would run in a course of the week. So like on Instagram, Facebook, and stuff. And again, they're just focusing on making something fresh, get people's mind sort of refreshed for the auction and exhibition that was coming up. And these are actually the 3 final pieces that came from that collaboration. So yeah, just shortly, I think hopefully at the end of this presentation, some of the things that I'm kind of mentioning, the projects that I'm going through, it kind of makes sense in a way. So just shortly after that project, I've got a message from the wonderful people at Norman Copenhagen saying that they saw the 19 Chairs project and they really like the aesthetics and the sort of dynamics and the vibe that we created with the film, with the sound and all that. And they had something that was coming out that could actually, potentially live in that world as well. So this was a project that was going on at Norman for about 6 years. So the designer, Simon Leagold, he's been working on that for about, again, 6 years. Well, there's been a lot of studies, a lot of experimentation and tests for the various different spaces and environments that these chairs could actually live in. They had photography, they had film, they had interview with the designer, and some other materials that was coming out for press release. But they also wanted to make something a little bit different this time, and the CGI animation could actually come in quite handy. So when the brief came in, it was it was just a lovely surprise to see that the 19 Chairs project again was sort of the main reference for it. So again, fresh, dynamic, sort of clean and slick aesthetic would play a big role within that. And we also had a bit of a note that's saying like, we really like what we did here. Can you just do you once again, please? Which, all these sort of elements does actually, it did connect with the aesthetics of the product. We also had a few checklists, a few items on the checklist that we wanted to hit this time. So the first one was actually to showcase the packing ability of the product, which is something quite important if you work within the hospitality, food and beverage, like, hotels and all that kind of stuff. This is just basically, a big selling point for them. And secondly, how easy it was to actually put the chair together, because if they come packing, people could actually build themselves. We also had a prototype this time, which was really helpful to study and understand how the pieces work a little bit better. So, just basically having this piece at hand to sort of see how we put that together, how all those things work, it was incredibly helpful. So now with, very good understanding of the product, of the sort of the story that goes behind it, and a prototype at hand, and a brief actually saying, hey, can you do you? We actually move on to begin work. And, something that happened with these two projects I just mentioned to you guys was something that first one had a lot of freedom, and the second one was like, hey, you had that freedom and at the previous one, and can you, try achieve that same one? So we used the same process in terms of, we didn't even jump onto a storyboard set narrative, but more of a, let's explore, these sort of abstract elements that actually compose the chair in, just using the design language that they have, as well as the materiality and the textures and the coloration that the product has to sort of, build the film behind it, basically. So what you guys look in the screen right now is just a few more style frames that we use, just to explore. Again, same sort of slick, minimalistic, and sort of elegant vibe that we had previously. We just sort of translate into this piece right now. So we're just showcasing, the color variations that they have, some of the materiality that it plays with. So going from, leather, upholstery, fabric, and all that onto the sort of plastic they used on the chair as well. We also play a tiny bit with the type because they had a specific type made for the chair. And again, you see on the right-hand side, some of the variation in the colors and, how they all come together. So yeah, again, just playing with all these style frames, using that same sort of line of lighting and stuff to, bring them all to life. And here is actually the final piece. Cool. So the next section I want to talk about is basically, as much as, some of these commercial projects are great, there is, always a will and a sort of curiosity to keep exploring different things within 3D. So, I've always been heavily influenced by photography, being that landscape, architecture, product, or portrait, you just name it. And as many of us, have been in the industry, I thought, throughout 2021, decided to play around with different styles and different approaches, that I kind of liked and anew, taking, reference and understanding from architecture, visualization, and photography, just trying to blend it all together to create this sort of abstract, surreal, and almost soothing spaces. And yeah, most of them, again, just taking inspiration from the many photographers and designers and artists that I've always admired throughout my career. So this was basically something I decided to do throughout the years, and it was quite interesting to see how they kind of opened my eyes a little bit to to understand different aesthetics and how these things will sort of play a role within the next projects that were kind of coming in and stuff. And it also helped take a break from the commercial work that was kind of heavy throughout the past 12 months. So some of these take inspiration from amazing photographer Adam J. Barkley and the artist Shane Griffin, which both of it I'm really big fan of. Some of them taking inspiration from a Scottish photographer, which is Richard Gaston, but also with a bit of a twist in terms of the coloration and the sort of vibe that applied through the process. And then ultimately, Mr. Ruben Wu, which is one of my favorite photographers out there. So with these ones, the whole idea was to try to create basically abstract sets and abstract environments that kind of, I don't know, this kind of take you somewhere, but you don't really know where it's taking it. And at the same time, exploring some of the technicalities that I kind of sort of wanted to play with and stuff. And ultimately, some of them became pieces on their own that took their own form, became animations, and well, some of them actually became NFTs as well. So yeah, so the whole idea of showing this and showing this connection between these projects to you guys right now is I suppose in how these things actually connect to one another and sort of form your own line of work, and then that consequently brings in some more work that you can connect all these other pieces later on. So the last project I'd like to talk to you about today is actually one of my favorite projects that took place this year, which funny enough is about taps. So it's this sort of minimal, cinematic, and it's got this very nice elegance behind the narrative. So yeah, early this year, I was approached by this wonderful company called Sussex. They are a tapware company based in Australia, and they basically were going through a whole brand refresh that aimed to, strengthen the message to the public, but also tell stories of some of the products that they had previously. So with this one was a tap actually called Caliber, which is one of the great pieces. So it got amazing design and very versatile as well. So yeah, so the idea, it was like they wanted to create these films for these pieces, and each of them had their own story and their own take. Some of the projects would focus a little bit more on the design language, and some of the other projects would focus a little bit more on the materiality they have, which was quite unique for the company. So the concept that we wanted to create for Caliber particularly was this sort of idea between man-made and nature, and how one play with each other. So, how something rough and uneven and imperfect sort of blends within a sort of pure, perfect kind of world in a way. So yeah, these natural elements, how they live in harmony, how something that extracted from nature can live in a very pure architecture place, and always following that sort of contrasty sort of lines. So yeah, so with this one, we had a little bit more time, which is, always good for the artist. So we decided to, again, this basically taking the first step onto storyboards, which was better to set a narrative and set a sort of pace for the whole film. And then we moved on to explore a whole bunch of different style frames. And the beauty behind this project was something that I was potentially trying to connect throughout this presentation, was it connected a lot of the things that I've explored for the past 12 months. So, you take this sort of minimalistic, slick and elegant and basic product visualization, product animation, and you blend within the architecture spaces, the abstract landscapes, the contrast between line and shadow, and all the stuff that has been played with throughout the year actually took a wonderful place when this came in, and we could actually blend it all together and make one great piece out of it. So once again, these pieces were just exploring all these design elements and all that design language. And it became quite interesting, again, just playing with this contrast. And you can see quite clearly in some of the style frames how these two words could actually blend together, how, black and white, dark and bright, and all that could actually work. So yeah, it's just endless style frames for this one. We, again, as we had more time, we took the opportunity to actually explore these pieces quite decently, and make their own world, and sort of they have their own lives within each of the frames and each of the part of the film. So yes, so yeah, just a whole bunch set of different architecture spaces, and all abstract, rough, uneven, imperfect, blending with that pure architecture world. Also, one of the big challenges for this one was actually having the sort of liquid simulations, which we're not really aware of, just not really experienced with, basically. And Phoenix FD played a wonderful role, because if you come from architecture visualization, for instance, you're very familiar with V-Ray, and all that kind of stuff. So moving on to Phoenix wasn't something that would be, end of the world, or something like that was actually something that was possible. So yeah, again, just played a wonderful role and kind of made things happen for us quite nicely. And ultimately, Tyflow played a wonderful role as well within the film, which is something that has been taking its own place within the workflow every day. So every day, just using more and more Tyflow for actually all sorts of work within the workflow. So from spreading things around, from clot simulations and all that kind of stuff that previously could be a little bit harder. Now it's become a bit more sort of doable and intuitive and actually fun to do. So yeah, these are just more exploration, style frames and a few tests here and there that actually help the film come together. And yeah, this is actually the final piece. Cool. So basically, the way I wanted to sort of, do this thing today, it's kind of share how, a lot of the things that we did previously, which started with a very collaborative and, non-commercial work, actually led into some very special things down the line. And some of the work that was done previously, set the base and set the ground for these other things to happen. And one of the things that, actually, just talking to a friend, I think I actually had this conversation with Fabio before, was like, what are the things that kind of happened to you? How do you feel about this whole experience, like going your own and stuff like that, which has been, quite special for me particularly. So I just want to share with you guys a few, sort of tips. If you're thinking, of going in this sort of path, going on your own, starting your own things and all that kind of stuff. Some of the things that I learned and, I kind of took from, for the heart and, learned a lot from it, just wanted to share with you. So the first thing is, it's so cheesy, but it just made sense. So if you ever saw the Steve Jobs speech on, I'm probably going to miss this, but I think it was like Stanford University or something, it talks a lot about connecting the dots, which is something that, you can't really connect the dots looking forward, but you can connect the dots looking past. So, just want to share that some of the proactivity and some of the actions that you're taking right now will most likely have a response at some point, for the good or for the bad. And if you're very self-aware of, the stuff that happened, you can actually take a lesson from it, apply that, and, move on. And even if they don't manifest themselves kind of physically and sort of visibly, they will still do sort of subconsciously, and you kind of learn from that and move on with that. So just make sure you have that in mind, if you're thinking of taking that path, actually. The second thing is that it's going to be so fucking hard, but you're gonna see that. And when you do see and get to that point, make sure you're sort of ready for that. Because one of the things that I learned throughout the past 12 months was, I've worked hard before, but I've never worked as hard as I've been working right now. So make sure you're aware of that. Make sure your loved ones, your family and friends, they actually in the same page as you, because you're gonna bring them to this journey whether you like it or not. They're gonna become sort of, not victims, that's not the right word, but they're gonna follow you, they're gonna be next to you, and they're gonna basically live that thing with you for the course that you're doing those things. And last, but I think the main thing that I've learned like throughout this whole thing is like, make sure you do you, because I've learned some lessons throughout this thing, which is some of them are good, some of them are bad. But the main thing is like, if you do you, the main things that will happen will be kind of, you know, by your own choice, by your own decisions and stuff. So yeah, one of the things that I've been thinking a lot of is literally like, no one knows what you want to do. No one knows how fast you want to do, and no one knows where you're gonna go. So when you do you, that's kind of on you. You know, there's so many yous in those phrases. So yeah, just make sure you do your diligence, check in with yourself, and yeah, get yourself to work, because things will move on and you make things happen. So yeah, thank you so much, guys. Really appreciate it. Thank you. I hear you. Should I stop sharing? How long was my presentation? Oh wow. Okay, I had 50 slides in here, guys. I was like, I'm not looking at anything, guys. I get too nervous. I close all the windows here. Yes, yeah, thank you. Thanks, Fabio. No, I really appreciate it. Yeah, and when I was putting this together, I was trying to find the photos, because I still have all the photos from the very first one and stuff. I remember, like, I don't know, the piano and all that kind of stuff, but I couldn't find it because of my old phone or something like that. But yeah, I really appreciate it, guys. Yeah, it was something I was about to mention at the beginning, but yeah, it was one of those things that you're like, oh man, I want to talk to you too once, because, you know, as you said, like, you kind of become part of. It's a big family, right? So you kind of become part of it, and you're like, oh, I want to have my own take on it. So I do appreciate you guys inviting, and also Desk, and yeah, everyone basically. Hope it was all right. Cool. Hopefully. Yeah. Awesome. Thanks, guys. Cool. Cool. No worries. Awesome. So yeah, thank you guys. Thank you once again. I really appreciate it. Yeah, hope to see you soon in Vienna next time, hopefully. So I know. It's yeah, true. Fantastic. Awesome. Thanks, guys. Yes, I'm here.